Welcome back to the things we know. I'm Carrie Morin.
Why are you laughing already?
Because you're laughing at me because I always take too long to start. But it's because I have to accept that you're recording and
I know
then
that's kind of
sorry.
annoying. Yeah, for again, behind the scenes, I'm Lisa Callahan, but we do this on Zoom and it is on YouTube uncut. We don't edit a lot, but it is on YouTube uncut. And so, yes, when I hit record, if Carrie's the first one to talk, she has to wait till the little box on Zoom says you're recording. And so there always feels like there's this big delay.
Where Lisa's wondering if I'm having like some sort of brain blip or something because you're looking at me like
little brain fart.
And then you're like silently laughing. And then I laugh and you're like, why are you laughing? So I wonder if we couldn't see each other, I wonder how much more professionally these would sound. But maybe not as fun.
No. I'd be like, knock, knock, knock. Is this thing on?
Okay. Today we're gonna riff a little bit on an idea or something we talk about not just as coaches, but because we are dedicated to good communication. And also one of our listeners, somebody that also kind of threw it into our inbox once as or maybe a comment on a thread, like that's something that they would like to see us say more about. And so it's intention versus impact, right? It's like, what's the distinction, how we can understand better, how things land differently than we intended or hoped.
Yeah, and the ways we've learned to sort of mitigate a negative impact. I mean, this is all about communication and what we say and how what we think we're saying and how it lands for the person we're talking to, right?
Yeah, it's often a postmortem set of 3 words that I often say, when you're kind of doing the, I don't know, the investigation after the fact of like, why did this go badly? Or I didn't mean it. And I'll often, just be sipping my coffee, not whether I'm asked or not, like intention versus impact. I'm telling you, like what? Hoping that they ask me to say more. But like, because not often it's not only that I use them often, especially with my kids, to really like walk away from misunderstandings with like, oh, what if next time, there was this, but like, yeah, I just feel like it's helpful for me too, to think about, I didn't intend for that. And sometimes, and we could talk about this, maybe we'll get into it or not. I don't know that I like outlined this for us, but like, are we responsible for the impact?
That's a good point. Well, okay, so let's take a step back. You said you always hope people say, tell me more. So I'll do just that. Tell us more, Carrie.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for asking. So intention versus impact to me, refers, because these are things, right? Refers to the distinction between like what a person's intending to communicate or achieve with their actions or words and the actual effects or outcomes those actions and words have on others, right? Or like on a situation or on other people. This concept is often discussed in the context of communication, but also behavior, social interactions. I mean, it can be like broad or just like the beginning of the chain of events. There's an intention with it, but does the outcome match the intention?
Yeah, and I think it's even more murky with the advent of texting, because right? Because you know how you're writing those words, but how they're received on the other end or vice versa can be completely off base. So this intention refers to motives, goals, or purposes behind an individual's actions or words, what they meant to convey or accomplish, and then impact is the real world consequences and effects of those actions or words. It's how the actions or words are actually received, experienced, internalized, the stories we tell ourselves about it, regardless of the original intention of said words.
All right, exactly. I love that. I love how you put that. The key idea here is that like, yeah, while someone's intention, I just keep thinking, listening to you, like thinking about all the things we're seeing in the wake of, I don't know, the last 10 years, right? In social media around like, but I didn't mean that, but I'm not this way. It's like, like have a little responsibility or awareness around how that might land for people. And the only way you're going to do that is to like learn, pay attention, and not take things personally. But I digress. Like, I think the key idea here is that while someone's intention might be good or harmless, the impact can still be hurtful.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I was intending to help, but that still hurt you. How do I respond to that? And if someone didn't intend any harm, the impact of their actions, you know, like this is where we could get into, like, I mean, I think we've talked about having an episode on like how to do a real apology, even if you didn't intend to hurt somebody, because
Right.
I don't know how many times you've had this happen in your relationships, but definitely with mine, it's like, I didn't mean to hurt you. And my response has become, well, I know you're not a dick, but you did hurt me.
Right.
I mean, like, so that did hurt.
The
So
two
like,
things can be true at once. You didn't mean it
exactly.
and you still
Yeah.
did. Yes. Yeah. I was giggling as I was reading through this because I was thinking the one that I just is in the top of my mind right now, because I had this conversation with Liam, God, probably 6 or 8 months ago, but I just recently saw there was an article about it. When you're texting, to not use punctuation, that the end of the text is just the end of the sentence. So there was a time, again, 6 or 8 months ago, where Liam said to me,
I'm laughing because I know what you're going to say. Sorry, go ahead.
You putting a period at the end of your text is so aggressive. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? That's just, that's how you end a sentence is with the period. But Gen Z, I don't know if it's millennials, but Gen Z definitely thinks if there is punctuation, specifically a period at the end of a text sentence, that its intention is to kind of be forceful and aggressive. And as a Gen X person who understands grammar and punctuation,
and we were raised by grammar police. We were raised by grammar police.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
And our intention is to like model good grammar, right? That's one of our intentions. And also, you know, like,
I mean, I get what they're saying in theory, right? Like, this is a conversation. I'm not going to say to you, Kari, you look nice today, period. Right. So, I mean, we're talking over text, but again, when you're writing, it's just automatic. And apparently I just saw somebody put this on Facebook yesterday. With the new update to iPhone, they have stopped the ability two spaces no longer makes a period. So iPhone has kind of decided to get in there and just help us Gen Xers out.
iPhone is also noticing my tone and putting a question mark there, so I don't have to be the goofy person saying question mark anymore. But then I do it anyway, and my kids are probably laughing. I'm laughing at you saying that because I think you and I have talked about this, but also like my friend Annie, who listens to the pod, like we've talked about this where she says, call me, and there's a period, and her kids are like, what's wrong? Are you mad? Am I in trouble? And Peter has since said, oh, so many times. I was like, uh-oh. And I was like, hi, what? Like and I think I told you too, that when like Miles was reaching out to an old boss about, you know, working for him again and finding out he didn't work there anymore, he was sharing that with us. And like, it's like, I don't know if something bad went down or not. And Peter goes, did he use a period? And he goes, yeah. And they went, oh, like, you know, like there was like an understanding of that, which was so funny.
That is hilarious. And
I was like, I would not notice it.
Well, and again, we'll go off the iPhone track here in a second, but I think it's like I so often have my headphones in and I'm listening to music or I'm working, and my texts get read to me into my ear. And I've recently felt like I've noticed that the texts being read to me have some intonation to it. Like Siri is now reading a text in a way that they're trying to read it like it's being said. And it's so funny because sometimes I'll get a text and I'm like, well, that's awkward. And then I go back and read it. I'm like, okay, Siri read it wrong. So not incorrectly, but
we laugh in our house about when we notice that Siri or Alexa sound passive aggressive. Like, do you want to reply? And I'll say no. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
That's what it feels like.
All right.
Or Alexa judging our music. Like, she goes, all right.
Yep. Okay. All right. Yes. So enough about texting.
Okay.
So again, the understanding though of the distinction between the intention and the impact is, gosh, I mean, it's crucial for effective communication, for showing empathy, for being able to build healthy relationships. It helps us understand and recognize that our actions and words have consequences, sometimes beyond our intention. And so if we can be mindful of how others perceive or experience our words or our actions, it goes back to sorry, not sorry. I mean, I think if it's received, and sort of the question you sort of asked earlier, is it our responsibility? I don't know that it's our responsibility if it's taken wrong, but I think there's some space where we receive the feedback that it was taken wrong and see if there's something we could have done differently. I don't think there's oh, I'm sorry you took it that way, because that's a shitty way of saying things, but I don't know. I think there's some space there for
right. I think
ends.
what you're saying is there's not always an apology warranted. I think it depends on the relationship and the agreement, for lack of a better word, the contract there, because you're right. I mean, there are people that are always going to take things very personally. You and I work with them, and we're working on that with them. And I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. I'm just saying, like, there are people who are like, they're going to read into everything, and that is not your responsibility to apologize for. And yet there are times where people can be really clueless, and we're going to talk about some examples. And I think what you're saying is it's an opportunity to learn and do better, and sometimes apologize where appropriate.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think
because also, I think there is, it's a learning thing. It's not like get it right every time. Yeah.
It just reminds me, and again, I'm going back to a story that not everybody's familiar with, but like, I just think about when you and I were on stage at the HCI retreat, and we talked, and we did Shark Tank, and we talked about receiving feedback and taking and I've said this to so many of my clients: when you're getting feedback, remember, still opinion. And instead of getting defensive right away, take all the feedback and then parse it out. What is true? What isn't true? What feels right? What doesn't feel right? But I think if you're getting a response from somebody that they have, your intention had a different impact on them, I don't think it does not make sense to me to automatically throw up a defense. Well, that's not what I meant. Blah, blah, blah. Let the feedback come in and then digest it, and maybe go back with a new part of the conversation, And
this brings in it makes perfect sense. This brings in expectations kill joy. Like, because you have an intention. If it's really loaded with expectation, you could miss the opportunity, like, to get to where you want by not taking the feedback, by not just, learning from it.
Yes. It also reminds me again of the 4 agreements. The first one being be impeccable with your word, and don't make assumptions, and don't take things personally, right? The 4. So impeccable with words, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, do your best. We're not always there's always going to be times something lands wrong. You taking it in, or the person you're talking to taking it in. But if you can be impeccable with your words, I think it happens less.
I do love that. That was such a great reminder. And also, I want to just flag that we should, share a little bit more of the 4 agreements when this one airs.
Oh, yes.
Note to self. Okay. I was trying to think of some good examples, and we don't have to go into all of them, but I just was kind of coming up with some, because I know you and I have some personal ones. Like, if for people listening, like, where would I look? Where would I learn from this, or where would I notice where intention and impact can, go 2 different directions? So we were going to share some. So one I was thinking of, like, what I love to call the complisalt, right?
Yep, I love it.
Compliments gone wrong. Like, imagine someone intends to compliment a friend by saying, "You look so much better with makeup." That is like such a funny example to me, because I was like looking for different examples of this, and like, "You look so much better with makeup on." I would never say that, but the complisalt being like, "Oh, you wrote a book," like, wow, like, are you surprised? Or, wow, you're looking so much better. There's ways you can compliment people that really take them into a very self-conscious place. The intention might be to make a friend look good, right? Or feel good, right? Like, but the impact could be that the friend feels self-conscious. So I notice this a lot when people are like, have you lost weight? And like, and you and I have said this before in previous, like, can we all just switch to like, you look great, or it's so great to see you, or your energy is so bright today. You know, can we get away from the body compliments, because those almost always will have an impact different than you think. You might even really have a great intention to compliment somebody in the group you're with, and you might accidentally have an impact on the people you don't compliment.
True.
So there's just a way to like, you know, be generous with your compliments, but also think about what you're complimenting.
Yes. Be impeccable with your word.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think, and that's I think that's I can imagine that's probably one of the biggest examples of intention versus impact, you know.
And I also think of the what. I'm just saying you look.
Yeah. No, and it's hard, you know. And again, yes, we talked about this back with diet culture bites and make your body your bestie. I mean, it's a tough one, and I find myself parsing words a lot. And I think I said this example back then, but like I have said to Charlotte, you look like you've dropped some weight, and I hate saying that to you, but I know that it feels good to hear that. And so I say that whole fucking sentence. So I like try to cut off the salt where it can be, because I'm like, you know, that's not what I think is the best part of you, but I know that you've been working at it, and I want to compliment that it's happening for you, you know. And she always says, no, thank you. I need to hear that. So, but as the mom of a daughter and having lived through diet culture for so long, it's a real hard thing for me to do. I always have to like caveat it at the end. Because you just don't know. You don't know how it's going to land on any given day. So that's a good one.
I don't know why this is coming up for me, and it may come up again, but it's just like, also, I've been hearing this lately in different places. Like, I'm proud of you. Sometimes has the impact of, oh, great, it's important to make you proud. Or, you know what I mean? Instead of, wow, you worked really hard.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like, I'm proud of you makes it about me versus you worked really hard is all about you.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that reframe though. That's really good. It's interesting. Charlotte is, as we're speaking, starting in audition process for my favorite musical. And she literally said to me the other day, I want to be Sally because you want me to be Sally. And I was like, whoa. No. I want you to be in Cabaret. If you get Sally, that's great. I think that's a great part for you. But any part's good. Like, I'm good no matter what. I said, I appreciate that. I know that's a fun little important thing, but at the same time, like, no, this is not about me. So it is funny, you know, you can have this impact from intention that had nothing to do. You didn't actually say it. Like, Charlotte just knows that's my favorite musical. And so in her mind, I want her to be Sally. No, I want her to be in the musical, and she will be.
Right.
You know, but I don't care what part she has, you know.
Yeah, totally.
So it's funny, like, it doesn't even have to happen in the moment. You might have an impact that was not intentional, and you don't hear about it for years when your kids come out of therapy and say, no, I'm just kidding.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that is I'm thinking about family dinner table. Like, we have this intention to like love our kids and have them and hand over all of our best traits. And yet just, you know, sorry to say if you have no idea about this, but like, we also accidentally sometimes hand over our shitty traits too.
Not accidentally. Yes, always accidentally, but it does.
Happen. Like, it does happen. And so like, there's the intention, and then the impact of just you're like being together and loving each other means like big-hearted kids who love us are also going to try and take on our burdens too. So there's this reality to it that just invites us again to like be learning and paying attention.
The next one's microaggressions. And I don't know if my example totally fits under this, because obviously I think we're all aware of microaggressions that are so very blatant, like, wow, you speak really good English, or, oh, where are you from? You know, like those little things we say that seem innocent, and we now know they aren't, you know. I mean, these are things that have been said for years, and now we're so aware that it becomes super cringy, and yet it still happens, but the one that I was thinking of, and again, this is probably not exactly the right space, but I was thinking back to our conversation with Liam and Peter, where Liam is so upset about me calling him an old soul. In my mind, I was complimenting him. He's an old soul, but in his mind, it's, what did he say? I think in the pod, Mabel barked, but Liam said, "Stop calling me an old soul when you just mean I'm weird."
I thought we removed the bark, but maybe not. But yeah, I note for editing, but yeah, he did say that. I loved that he said that, because like it's saying it again. You just think it's this compliment. He feels othered,
diminished, othered. Yeah. And I think there's the microaggressions, right?
Yes.
It does other people.
I think,
quote unquote, other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's one I think that's pretty out there in the zeitgeist right now. And yet it's really easy to accidentally do it again. And to me, in that instance, if somebody points it out, it is absolutely deserving of an apology. You can say, "Oh my gosh, that was not my intention, but I hear you and I am so sorry." Like, I don't think there's no way around not apologizing for a microaggression.
Right. And I think the other example here, like telling someone who's not from here, like, your English is so good, like that. I mean, that's a really great example of what someone would think is I'm just so impressed. Like, you don't realize the impact of that. And I was an ESL teacher way back. And I remember just having to point out to someone I was training, he's like an engineering professor where he comes from. He's only a janitor here while he's learning English. So, and not that you should treat somebody like that's like their career anyway, but I just want you to really understand that like, we don't talk to, they're not children, they are adults here. And they all have stories and backgrounds and all of that.
I mean, I think a great book to sort of really put this in perspective is Caste.
Yes.
I mean, that there is shit about microaggressions all over the place. And the one that the part that was really sort of eye-opening to me was like, for those of you who haven't read Caste, it looks at America and Germany and India. And even within India, it's like, if you are a different caste, even if you're over here in America,
it's a problem.
Indians who consider themselves a quote unquote lower caste will not speak to the person, and they could have completely different, the higher caste person might actually have a lower job, and the lower caste person won't talk to them because that's how they've grown up. It was eye-opening, mind-blowing to me around all of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Another one is just insensitive humor. Obviously, that seems like a given. But people making jokes about things like mental health. People make a lot of assumptive stuff with humor around not realizing like somebody in the room might have fertility issues or mental health. I definitely, I've had my kids tell me, I don't know. I feel like I've done a lot of work in my life, so I don't let that stuff impact me. I notice it, but doesn't mean it's okay. But if somebody jokes, I know this sounds really strange, but just because of humor and things they watch, if somebody jokes or mimics a seizure around one of my kids, they really hate that. They feel really upset and offended. And that's maybe an overstatement. My kids aren't like, they're not overreacting, but they come home and be like, gosh, and sometimes they speak up and sometimes they just kind of roll their eyes. But just as, people shouldn't have to know that's insensitive, but I think you do learn it by tripping over it.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing, as you're saying this story, I see this storyline of like, if your kid said something, then the person you're making the joke getting super defensive and being like, oh, you can't even joke anymore. That's the thing that pisses me off around insensitive jokes, is when you point out like, oh, we don't really do that anymore. And
Yeah.
oh, it makes me so
And I think it's
angry.
gone really well because they're a really like open generation. I think it's gone well. And I think also it's gone the other way where it just made them feel really bad and then they felt bad, just the whole
Right.
snowball of feeling bad. I haven't heard of anyone, being a jerk about it, but
Yeah, I didn't actually mean your
yeah,
kids. I was just like working that scenario down, of like you point something out to somebody that's like, yeah, that's not really something that's appropriate anymore. Because when you know better, you do better. But then the person who feels defensive then being like, oh, it's just politically correct out the ass, that.
yeah,
And so then it just snowballs it away. And so it's almost a pick
yeah,
your battles situation, I think,
yeah.
in some ways.
I love,
Unintentional. Sorry, go ahead.
before we get to unintentional exclusion, this other one, it just occurred to me that I have had a negative impact, like helping without asking.
Okay, tell
When
me.
Griffin was in the hospital, I had so many people be like, can I do your dishes? Can I clean your house? Which was such a lovely intention. And I kind of was like, fuck off. Just like I asked you to come over and hang out with me. I didn't ask you, like now I don't want to be self-conscious that my house is messy. It just was, I
Okay,
hated
but all
it.
right, so
Like,
let me ask a little bit more about that. So what story are you telling yourself when somebody's asking that? I mean, I,
well,
I hear what you're saying. I get this one for sure.
this is
Asking, helping without asking. But if somebody walks in and they're like, oh my gosh, can I help you clean up? You took it as like my house is a mess.
well, no, no, that's not exactly how it went. It was
Okay.
like nobody asked, and I think
Oh,
what's best, what I've learned is like ask the person, like, if you have some ideas, would these things be helpful? And I would have probably, and I think in those cases, most of the time I was like, no, I don't need that. I mean, I actually love doing my own dishes and they weren't even that bad at the time. But no, I've definitely had people like, I want to come over and do this for you. And me being like, and it probably was who it was, like
sure.
maybe it was people I wasn't as close to, but I didn't ask for that.
Yeah,
And
no, that I get.
it
Coming in is
suddenly made me, because they had seen my house, it made me feel like it was ooh, your house is a mess. I should come do that. That's how it felt at the time,
sure.
sleepless,
That
when I
makes
was
sense.
thinking like, what I actually need is just someone to,
Some companionship.
yes.
Yeah.
So
No, I
anyway,
think so. Okay. So let me then ask just to put a bow on that. If someone came, you're okay, or it feels better if somebody asks you and you have the ability to say yes or no. But
mhm.
the sort of intention versus impact is somebody thinks they're helping by they come in.
Yeah,
Like,
I
oh,
think it's the assumption, because the other thing is, if I think of Griffin, sometimes people go to help him and he doesn't want that, like
right.
he
Yeah.
just wants people to tell him how to do it. He doesn't want people to do it for him.
Yep.
So yeah.
No, I think that's probably a pretty sneaky one.
Yep. And,
Right.
and
Like,
like such a beautiful intention, but it is
that's my
often
point.
about
Yeah.
like how the person needs to feel versus what other person needs.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no, that's what I'm saying. I think it's sneaky because I think the person never comes in like a bull in a china shop thinking that it's going to be offensive or it have
Right.
a bad impact. So, I think always asking questions,
Mhm.
asking for permission.
Asking for permission
I mean,
is
it's
really
just that
good.
I think that would
I mean, I'm
nip
seeing it
that in the
right now
bud.
with the Maui fires. I'm seeing, because
Yeah.
I'm following that so closely, is
Yeah.
they're like, listen to us. We don't need this, this, and this. This is what we need. And
Yep.
people are, I see Matthew McConaughey and his son being like, we're taking diapers over. And maybe that is needed. I don't mean to throw them out as a bad example, but there's people feeling such deep things in their heart and they want to help. And
Yeah.
it's really important to stop and ask what's needed.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
No, I think, yeah, asking for permission makes
Yeah.
sense on that one. So unintentional exclusion.
Yeah.
I think this one is also because I have an example. So Charlotte
Sure.
had a little brouhaha with a very good friend. And when we hashed it out, I think we came to the conclusion that there were things that Charlotte was not inviting her friend to because she knew that the other friends that she was hanging out with were not the original friend's favorite people. And so Charlotte thinking, well, she's going to say no anyway, so I'm not going to ask her, I think unintentionally was harmful because she didn't allow that person to have the choice. Because again, I think kind of like your example, it's about choice, right? When somebody just blows into your house and says, I'm going to clean it up, like maybe you didn't
Mhm.
want that. Same with like you don't make assumptions. Don't assume that your friend doesn't want to hang out with these other people. Let her make the
Yes.
decision.
You don't manage other people's experiences is
Right.
such a like great, it's a great lesson. It's a great reminder of staying on your map and like minding your own business in a beautiful way. Like
Yeah.
hold the other person capable of opting out, of handling it, of responding to it differently, of rising to the occasion.
Yep.
It is such a beautiful invitation. And yet we all do it. We're considerate. Like that's like when we're making seating charts. I always think that that's the funniest thing because those were some of my like favorite LSAT questions. Okay, like you're inviting this many people to a dinner party. B will not sit next to C. D will only come if this one is like comes with this one. Like it's so funny because we've actually had those social situations, and I remember for I think it was my wedding and my like listening to my parents talk about aunts and uncles, although they can't like and their history and just cracking up. But there's a lot of managing the experiences of others that like actually you can let that go and just let people figure it out, allow and hold people capable of saying yes or no. And yet, gosh, that's so thoughtful. It's so thoughtful to think of like, well, she might not be comfortable here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I do think that's where assumptions put up a wall between you and other people accidentally, because like I'll say to Griffin, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, I just figured you were busy. And it's like, I wasn't. And so you suffered longer, but like there's like these things where you're being considerate and you exclude somebody from something where it could have been much helpful and better for both of you.
Yeah. I mean, I think any of these things, it's a tightrope, right? I mean, it really is a balancing act between intention and impact. And so again, I just keep going back to, with the exception of poor humor, or microaggressions, I should say, on poor humor. I think when somebody is pointing out to you the impact you had, whether it was your intention or not, allow that to flow over you and then figure out what your response is. Just jumping to being defensive is probably not going to help the situation.
Yeah. I know we want to get to the song, but I want to talk just a little bit, like, how do we improve?
Yeah.
I know that it's almost always a Monday morning quarterbacking kind of thing. Like, whoa, how could that have gone better? And that's awesome. That's what we're human, but there's ways, and you've kind of alluded to some of it already, but do you feel like we can improve that impact, that intention to impact ratio?
I mean, it feels like it's a learning process. I do think a lot has changed in the world in the last 7, 6, 7, 8 years, where being woke or politically correct, pointing out things like microaggressions or how something makes you feel has been so degraded that I think you can be a little shy about pointing it out, and yet pointing it out and having that received in an open way could make everyone's life better.
It almost feels like you're possibly suggesting, or this is what I'm getting from it, is, practice it with people you have great trust with, like you have a good, rapport with, because, where you have the agreement to stretch each other and give each other feedback and grow each other. Because I mean, one of the things we were going to say was like, consider the audience, right? Sometimes it may not, it may not matter. I mean, obviously, like we're talking a lot about relationships or small groups, but there's a lot of ways in leadership. You see like leaders rise or fall with like the lack of self-awareness or lack of empathy in their messaging. And they have these beautiful intentions, and it just falls flat because they're not paying attention. They're not, they don't have the right people around them giving them the feedback and helping them adjust. Right. So it feels like, get the input, be open, be curious, be willing to learn, be reflective.
Yeah.
is kind of what it sounds like you're, like, don't not do it, but maybe practice it with people you have a good trust with.
I mean, I do think there's a pick your battle scenario, right? If it's a person that you're going to be interacting with long term, I think it benefits everyone to get on the same page about their impact on you or vice versa, right? If I'm at a rally and some jackass yells something stupid at me, am I going to go over there and get in his face? No, because I'm not going to change that idiot's mind, right? And so I got to let just go, brush it off. So I think it's imperative you do it with people that you trust, because you want to keep trusting them.
That's true. That's the only time it's really worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might not have an intention with people you don't care about.
Yeah.
So song, you came up with a good song.
Yeah. So I picked a song called Good Intentions. It seems a little on the nose, but it's from Toad the Wet Sprocket, who I love. And I'm just going to read the lyrics here. It says, "It's hard to rely on my good intention when my head's full of things that I can't mention. Seems I usually get things right, but I can't understand what I did last night. It's hard to rely on my own good senses when I miss so much that requires attention. Have to laugh at myself, and I can see that I'm not blind. There's little relief. Give us reprieve for the things I've left behind. I'm positive that I'm not blind." So I think that kind of lands, because it does feel like, I know when I make the mistakes, I do a lot of self-reflection and kind of beating myself up. That's one of those things that will stick in my brain pan for a long time. I mean, there are things that I sometimes rehash from.
That kind of surprises me about you. And really? I think that I think just part of also like learn and let go, right? Like, you don't seem to perseverate on that stuff. I have a friend who talks about, oh, my Irish guilt is spiraling. Was I rude when I did that? And I'm like, no, good. We're all good. But, I don't feel like you beat yourself up. I think sometimes you're like, I think I'm going to go back and say something about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm thinking more in terms of, yes, I mean, I would definitely apologize. Sometimes I do have to go through the whole talking to myself, like, okay, I feel like that wasn't the right thing to say, but they didn't say anything. So maybe I let it go, because am I just making it worse than it already is? But yeah, I mean, I am Catholic. I did grow up with Catholic guilt. So, but it's not that I am sitting over here just constantly self-flagellating, but it's more like every once in a while, a memory will pop in my head and I literally cringe. I'm like, oh, I wish that would go away. I wish I'd forget that thing.
If we go way back to that episode, Mistakes Were Made, I feel like intention versus impact is a big theme of some parenting stuff we learned along the way. Like, and I hear about that a lot in people like going through marital issues and sometimes through divorce. It's like, wow, that's what you got from what I said. I didn't mean that at all. Right. Yeah. So like,
but there goes back to, those are the types of situations I think that the discussion is imperative. Exactly. And that both people are open. Maybe it has to be under a supervision situation, but where both people are just open to hearing and receiving and then parsing it out.
Yeah.
Later.
This is, we've talked about the people code before, but this is what I really loved about learning those different, it's not really personality types. It's literally core motivation. So if you understand, it's somewhat like intention. If you understand that a blue's core motivation is connection and intimacy, or that a red's is like their core motivation is, it sounds bad. It's not all bad, power, like, impact and all that stuff like that. That's the intention that they have. You're going to like understand them better, and you're going to like forgive the impact it has when you understand what their motivation is. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah. Okay. So
again, something we could probably talk hours on, and we're trying not to do.
Yeah.
Thank you, as always, for listening to The Things We Know. This has been a fun topic. Anything else you'd like to add before we?
Yes, just want to invite you to find us on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram. We just really invite you to follow us there if you aren't already, and to let us know on any of our posts, how this is landing for you.
What's the impact? Because our intention was to be incredibly helpful.
Or just entertaining.
Whatever. I mean, it's all the same.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week.
Bye.